Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the MBOM podcast. I'm Amanda and I'll be your host for today's episode. And for today, I have an amazing yogini yoga teacher here with me. Her name's Erin Evans. She teaches out of Banff, Alberta in Banff National Park. And I met her when I was working at Lululemon. She's an ambassador for the Lululemon Banff store, and I was kind of sold on her after the first photo I ever saw of her. The assistant manager that trained me was like, you have to check out this amazing yogi in our community. And it was a photo of a one-armed handstand with legs in sort of a Baddha Konasana position. And I was like, whoa, can people do that? That's pretty sweet. So went to her advanced class, was absolutely terrified of what to come if I was good enough to be there. And I was absolutely in awe of her teaching style, her presence, the ways that she spoke, everything like that. And I've really admired her ever since then. She's actually the teacher who really helped me get headstand. I was struggling with headstand when I first arrived in Banff, and I couldn't find my balance away from the wall. And she said, you've got it. Just turn around and do it. I'm here in case you fall. And I went up, and ever since then I've been not a master of headstand, but I've been confident in headstand. So thanks, Erin, for that. And Erin is here today to talk about becoming a yoga teacher. So she's taught a few yoga teacher trainings now, and she really developed hers from scratch for the program that was held at Rocky Mountain Yoga in Banff, and then another one held in Calgary, Alberta. And I really wanted to talk to her about doing that as, you know, a full-time yoga teacher, a mother, and then designing this program. So for those of you out there who are interested in someday becoming a yoga teacher and what that takes, Erin's here to tell you all about it. So without further ado, here's Erin. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Erin. It's really incredible to have you here today to talk about your journey as a yogi and a yoga teacher and a yoga teacher.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah. So I think probably best place to start is kind of your discovery of yoga and, you know, going from a practitioner to a teacher.
Okay. For me, it happened pretty quick. I met a woman, and this was 13 years ago. I met a woman that had a sparkle in her eye, and she was about 50 years old. And she spoke with such clarity and such conviction, and she spoke of things that I'd been craving my whole life, but couldn't find in church or through any sort of spiritual practice. And I was like, what do you do? I need to know. Like, I want to be like you. And she said, I practice yoga. So I started going to some yoga classes and immediately was hooked. I was like, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Lake Louise, and there was no yoga there. So after about maybe 6 yoga classes, I was like, well, I'll just teach a yoga class. Mm-hmm. So I rented a little space. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So nowadays, like, people are so well trained and their voices are so clear and their message is so clear. And I literally was winging it. I would be like, okay, step your, maybe put your hands down. Yeah, down. And then step out to the right with the right foot in any way. So I like bumbled my way through and started to teach some classes. And then a friend was like, you know, you should really take a course if you're going to be teaching, because it seems like you're probably going to teach. So then I took a course, and yeah, it sounds so silly and cliche, but it was like I knew that I needed to do it, and I knew that my heart wanted it so badly.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love that you just went out there and were just like, I'm going to teach this to people.
Because people now, oh, sorry, you go.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, people nowadays are like, I don't feel prepared. I'm like, you are way more prepared than I ever was. You're incredible already. I didn't really even know the sequencing. I didn't know really anything.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, that just makes me think about coming back from teacher training after having practiced yoga for like 8 years and still being like, I'm not ready. I can't do this.
Exactly. Now you know you're ready.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And then, so it was just like this very clear transition for you. You took a course and just became a teacher.
Yeah, I taught a little bit, and then my heart wanted to teach full time, but my background, my family, I have a business degree as well, and they were like, no, you need to have a real job. Maybe they didn't say that, but I felt the pressure of my family, like having a pension and having a good job. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to teach full time. I was like, I can't do this part time because I need to practice. I need to prepare my classes. I need to get experience. And I had a really bad scrambling accident on Mount Norquay, mm-hmm. like tumbled 50 meters down like a cliff face.
Oh my gosh.
And I busted my tooth. I broke my arm. I had staples in my head, my legs. And I sat there after I fell, and I knew I was okay, but I knew I couldn't move my leg, my arm, there was something wrong with it, and blood was all over my face, but I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I'm actually fine. Like, it hurts a little bit, but I'm fine. And I kept thinking, this is it, Erin. It could be over in a heartbeat. Like, you have to do what you love. And it was kind of messy. And I finally got the courage and was like, nope, I have to quit my full-time job. It will all work out. Mm-hmm. And for some lucky reason, it has worked out. And yeah, it's my biggest passion, my greatest joy.
I love that. That's such an incredible story.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I think it goes to show, like, Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body, mm-hmm. and how sometimes when we're in such bad pain, but we can't address the emotional factors, there could be a crazy accident that occurs, or an ailment, or a sickness. And I think that was like a prime example to me of like staying the course when I shouldn't, mm-hmm. or like picking up on the signals maybe before something bad has to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I feel like I've heard a lot of stories of like yoga teachers or people who have come to yoga and they're like, I came to yoga or I found yoga because I was in a really bad place, like either physically or mentally.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's really cool. I feel like it says a lot about the practice of yoga and like teaching yoga too.
Absolutely. Well, like the historical reason why the yogis developed the asana was because they studied themselves and they discovered humans are always in a state of dukkha. Like, I wish I was in the moment 10 minutes ago, or I'm depressed, or they're dull. And so they call that dukkha. And the point of the practice is to bring us into sukha, the sweetness. And so exactly what you just said, it's like remembering the awe and the miracle of life, and that human nature is to be like, I'm bored. I don't like this. I want to do more. And I think yoga just, pauses us in that moment of breath and present moment awareness.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. And so teaching yoga you've taught yoga for basically 13 years now. So you've obviously had a lot of experience teaching. What have been sort of like the ups and downs with it?
One of the hardest things is if I'm going through something personally in my life that's hard, and to teach, to leave my stuff at the door, mm-hmm. and to remember that my experience, definitely I can share that, and that's where the compassion grows. However, I'm there for you, not for me or the story of my sad life. That's a big one, and I think I'm getting better at it and also worse at it. So that's a big one, is to show up for your students. Some weird interactions, like men wanting to go on dates with you. That's kind of a funny one. That's only happened once, but it's
still awkward.
Yeah, it's awkward. Like, ooh, yeah. What else? I mean, it's just so fulfilling.
Yeah, mm-hmm. No, it's a pretty rewarding job. Did you ever have challenges like getting teaching jobs, or kind of how was that for you?
I think I started before it was really a thing. Like, it wasn't that popular. It was starting to be, but it wasn't that popular. And I didn't teach in a studio until I had taught for 4 years in gyms and community centers. So I feel like for me, teaching at a studio was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even approach studios because I knew the caliber of teacher in a studio was out of this world. Mm-hmm. So for me, I just wanted to get mileage so that I could teach at a studio and be equivalent kind of to the other teachers in the studio.
Yeah, that was sort of like my mindset when I came back from my yoga teacher training, and especially coming to a place like in the Bow Valley where there's so many incredible yoga teachers. I was like, I can't just walk up to like, you know, like Jeff Ma and be like, hey, give me a job. Like, I just got back from my teacher training, when there's teachers at that studio who've been teaching for so many years, and, you know, you and him are so incredible. Is that something, though, that you do recommend to your students now, though, is to kind of just go after it?
I recommend that they teach as much as they can. Mm-hmm. I recommend that they teach to their friends. They do community classes. They get experience. You know that book, From Good to Great? Yeah. Where it says, I think in that book it says you need 10,000 hours to be a master. Yeah. I think the more you can teach, the clearer you can get with your language, the better chance you have. And you want to hone your skills. You want to polish yourself as a teacher. And sometimes it's just cueing Surya Namaskara A 100 times to your boyfriend who's like, oh, I hate yoga. But some people are made for it. Like, I have friends that literally stepped out of their courses and taught in studios right away and were well received. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a tricky line. But I do think if you want it, you have to push a little for it.
Yeah, I know. I think that's kind of, you know, looking back on, I mean, I've only been teaching for 6 months, but even looking back on that 6 months, that's my biggest thing that I want, you know, listeners of the podcast to get, is that when you're a teacher and if you want to teach, because like lots of people do their teacher training and don't want to teach, but if you want to teach, go for it. Like,
yeah,
you got to ask for what you want.
And be a yogi, get on your mat and practice, read, study, become so infused with the sacredness of it that you can't, like, your passion just like comes out of your pores and people feel it. Mm-hmm. Cause that is like the key, I think, as a teacher. When I go to a class and I'm moved, it's somebody who is like living it and breathing it and loves it. Mm-hmm. And maybe is a little bit of a badass too.
You've definitely got that going for you. What do you recommend in terms of like practicing for teachers? Like, do you encourage your students to practice with other teachers or do more of a self-practice?
Good question. I think if you are thinking about teaching, go to classes and figure out what you love, what moves you, and what you didn't like. Start to discover as a teacher, like, what do you want to pass on to your students? However, getting on the mat on your own is very important to understand the way your own body functions and then to teach from that place, because you get the best intuitive hits, I think, when you're alone in silence on your mat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of this idea of practice what you preach, like to step on the mat as a teacher and encourage your students to, you know, stretch every day and, you know, to move your body in these ways and to be mindful and to show compassion for yourself is really hard if you're not doing any of those things for yourself.
Exactly. And I think people see through it. I think they do. I think there's a lot of people that talk the talk and they know radiant heart and elevated consciousness. They know these fancy words. However, I think in order for somebody to really feel it, it has to authentically come from the teacher. Like, the teacher needs to be practicing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it falls flat.
Yeah, totally. I definitely agree with that. And that's something that has been really important for me. Like, coming into the world of teaching is finding this balance between practicing on my own, going to teachers' classes that I really admire and love.
Yeah, totally.
Teaching as well. And it is a balance. And you kind of have to find that for yourself if you do want to teach.
Yeah. I remember MC Yogi one time. You know MC Yogi?
Yeah, he's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's pretty awesome. He did a talk at Wonderlust and somebody said, where do you get your inspiration from? And they're like, which artists do you listen to or what books do you read? And he said, honestly, it all comes from inside. He says, the moment I look outside myself is the moment that I start to question my validity. I start to question my importance. I start to question my skill. And I think that's big. Like, to trust that your message is good enough and that it doesn't have to be Erin's message or Jeff's message or Sean Corn's message, but you just like teach who Mel is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really great advice. I think that's something too that a lot of people can take away, and remembering too that like your message is good enough.
Oh, and that you're good enough. It's the hardest thing in the world.
Oh yeah, totally. I feel like, I don't know what it is about being a human, but I feel like we're just out there to destroy ourselves and put ourselves down.
I know.
So at what point in your teaching did you go from, simply being, not simply because it's not just simple, but being a teacher to developing a yoga teacher training and really wanting to guide other yogis to be teachers?
I've always been very hungry for yoga. I've attended so many workshops, done so many trainings. I always have my notebook. I'm front row writing down all the notes from the teachers. I've always been so hungry for it. And I remember when I took my level 3 training, I was like, I really want to do this. And so I had thought I would join up with my teacher's training group and start teaching teachers that way. Mm-hmm. And then something magically happened between Mindy and I, and she is like, I think you should write the curriculum. Like, why would you team up with another person? And she basically gave me wings. She's like, I want to run a training here. I think you can do it. And one girl said to me, you got out of your own way. And I think I did that. Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, she said that when creativity hits, you either roll with it or you get out of the way and somebody else gets that creative hit. And I feel like I just plugged away. My kid was little, like 10 months old. He would go to sleep and I literally would, even if I felt so tired and exhausted and bored and dull, I was like, just work. Mm-hmm. And I would type and I would work on what I thought was relevant for people that were entering this industry.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And you know what? It is amazing. I have to say it was really cool to put everything that I've learned on paper and what I think is relevant and how I think it's effective.
Yeah. Was there any point along there where you were like, I don't know if I know enough,
Yeah, like the 9 obstacles in the sutras, he talks about that a lot. Like you hit a point where you're like, somebody else should do this. Somebody else is better than me. I definitely hit those roadblocks, but I actually wrote out the 9 obstacles of Patanjali and put them above my desk. And then I literally would be like, it's like, you forget why you're doing what you do. You're being lazy. You're distracted. And I was like, okay, no, I'm just lazy. I'm distracted. Okay, I can do this. And I just pushed through. But it's so hard to have the faith to be like, this is going to be worth it. And I think many people writing books or movies or podcasts, they forget that what they're doing is relevant. They forget the reason why they started. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, Erin, why are you doing this? Well, I want to teach people to do what I love. I want to teach people to polish themselves, to serve themselves to the world. And I kept being my mantra, like, go back to that. How can people serve through this? How can you get people to understand themselves better? And that was the guiding force, I think, that made it happen.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I love that you took like some of the lessons that you teach teachers as yoga teachers to develop your teacher training. I think it just comes full circle, and it's just another great example of how amazing yoga is
Absolutely.
It's like such a broader thing than just like moving your body and the asanas.
Oh, no. I know.
And so when did you run your first yoga teacher training?
I ran it. So I finished 2 now. My first one was in 2014.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what was that like? What did that feel like? Like, was it like nervous, excited, mixture?
Oh my gosh. It was so surreal to watch a dream come true, because it was a dream that I actually thought I'd never do. Like, I was like, you're not good enough. You're not yogi enough. You're not vegan enough. You're not non-alcoholic enough. I literally was like, it won't happen for you. You're not spiritual enough. It was the most incredible thing. And the people that came to support me and to learn I've never experienced something so potent as the final closing circle, when we all had malas and we infused them with like a message from each practitioner.
Yeah.
And Like I felt like I was floating in the sky. I still feel like that. Like I just honestly feel so blessed.
That's really incredible.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate.
Yeah. I think like one thing that I really want listeners to understand is that, you know, when you get a yoga teacher training, you're really not limited to just, you know, one thing. And so I want people to understand that there's like so many options and pathways for you. And I think it's really cool that you've really just like followed yours. And
yeah, because some people will take trainings and then they'll become a public speaker. Some people will take trainings and become super interested in Chinese medicine. Like it's kind of a gateway into a different world, a different lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. And how long had you been thinking about being like a yoga teacher? Like, was that something that was a dream for quite a while?
Oh, yeah, probably 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, totally.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And each time I run it, it gets a little more clear and a little better maybe, or I'm learning, I guess, or along the way. My most recent training, I had a woman in her late 50s and she said to me midway through the course, she said, I haven't felt myself in 30 years. And in that moment, I was like, okay, what I'm doing is good enough. Because if I have helped that woman, well, I mean, she helped herself, but if we as a group have helped that woman feel herself again, my work is done. And so, you know, you think you're taking a training, you think you're running a training to teach people to stand on their hands or do Parvrita Trikonasana, when really you might just be reminding somebody of the spark that they had 6 months ago before their boyfriend broke their heart, or before their kid got sick, or before their husband left them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yoga
cool.
teacher training's a pretty incredible, like personal journey.
And through the course of the year, what you go through with people, like we had death, we had pregnancy, we had breakups, we had marriage splits, and I feel like over that course of the year, I went through all of it too. And it was these people, one girl's mom had a double mastectomy. And so each month we'd be like, how's your mom doing? And, you know, you ride the journey and it's like an ultimate connection and tapestry of like sisterhood, like kula, community, people that you can be like, oh my God, I'm having the worst day of my life, and tell you, even though I would never tell anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of, I guess, develop a bond that's a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
And especially like, so your format is one weekend, once a month for 9 months?
Yeah, I'm actually going to India in February though for a month-long training.
How are you feeling about that? That's amazing.
Okay. I'm the most scared I've ever been.
Yeah.
I'm the most excited I've ever been. And I pray that I can hold space or not hold space, that's a silly term, but that I can keep my energy level or my excitement or my peace at a beautiful level for the full month. Because I find with weekends, I'm so exhausted at the end of them. So I really want to be able to maintain a level. And I know the students will take over at some point and I don't need to do anymore, but that's my one kind of fear is like, can you do it? Can you teach asana every single day for an entire month?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot too. Like you're kind of like full on with them as they go through that journey. And like I did a 1 month intensive, so I don't know how to compare it to, you know, doing one full on weekend every month. But I know that, you know, as a student learning, like the month intensive it's intense. Like you're shoving all this information in your brain and you're learning so much without having all the time to digest it.
Exactly. What was the hardest part for you about your training?
Probably just like the time. Like by the third day, the teacher in the morning was like, okay, who wants to come, you know, guide us through like standing in Tadasana? And I was like, it's day 3. I'm not doing that. And she's like, you guys are going to be like yoga teachers in like 27 days. And I was like, God.
Did you do it? What was the first thing you taught?
Yeah, they started us with Tadasana and then like Surya Namaskar.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So just like finding your voice, because you have to find it so much faster, I think.
Absolutely.
So that was definitely the most challenging for me. And just like, those moments where you're like, I just want to not be learning anatomy right now.
Oh, I know.
It's like, I just want to go to the beach and like maybe surf a wave or two. But it's like such a cool growth opportunity. And I think it'll be really neat for you to have those comparisons between like doing it abroad and, a very developing third world country versus doing it in Banff,
where we have the comfort of coffee and food that's not going to make us sick and air that's really fresh and our beds that are really comfortable. It's going to be a real lesson in non-attachment, or what are you attached to? I guess we're going to find out pretty quick. No Wi-Fi, no cell phone.
No Wi-Fi. Wow.
No Wi-Fi.
Okay. There was Wi-Fi at mine.
I know. I'm like, eesh, gonna have to ease these girls in.
And what's it been like to like transitioning to being a mom while being a yoga teacher? 'Cause your little man's 2 now?
He's actually 3.
He's 3. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Kids are incredible for that. The tapas, the fire that they fuel you, and the understanding that you only have so many hours in a day, so many minutes in a day away from them, it really supercharges your focus. Like, it gave me laser point focus. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it changed everything in a very good way. Relationships that were kind of a waste of time, I had to cut them out. Television, things that were just a distraction and a waste of time, fully just had to cut it out, because I'm either with Mika, or I'm on my mat, or I'm studying, or I'm working on a project.
Yeah.
So it's been great. Some days I'm like, could I get rid of him? Could I give him to my parents for like 2 weeks? But motherhood is such a ride. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a pretty crazy journey.
It's like you have this shadow attached to you all the time, but the shadow, you need to wipe its bum and you need to feed it and it's always like, oh mom, like there's a dragon in my bedroom. Like, you need to kill the dragon. I'm like, it's 3 a.m. There's no dragon in your bed. I hate to break it to you. Santa's not real either.
Crushing
Anyways.
Little hopes and dreams.
Yeah, totally. And then I go on my mat and I'm like,
It must be a hard transition too, when you're like, you're giving so much energy all over the place. So you're giving all your energy to your child and, being a mom, and then you show up on the mat and you're there for your students.
I know. And then being a wife and being there for your partner. Yeah, it's a real balance act. I find at the end of the day, I am just exhausted.
Mm-hmm. You probably sleep pretty well though.
Totally. And something that a teacher of mine always suggests is that if you reach that place where you start to get annoyed or irritated at your students or whomever, it means that you haven't dug your well deep enough, and you need to dig a deeper well to have the capacity to serve more people.
Yeah.
Because it becomes like that, right? They see you on the street and they're like, oh, my back is still pretty sore. Do you have any recommendations? And you might be like, oh my God, I got to pick my kid up and I got to do this and I got to go to the post office. But just to have the capacity to answer people and to be there as a student and a friend and a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause it's interesting, 'cause like you are always their yoga teacher. Whereas like for you, it's like, you're always a yoga teacher, but you're specifically a yoga teacher in certain times and capacities.
Totally.
And, you're a mother in certain times and capacities, and you're a wife in certain times and capacities, and you're a fun girlfriend and other times and capacities.
Yeah. This one teacher, I think this is really important to remember as people that are teachers or anybody that's in the public eye. Patrick Creelman is a teacher out in Hong Kong, and he calls it the George Clooney effect, mm-hmm. where you have to be on all the time. You can be sad. That's important when you're sad or depressed or whatever. But when you're walking down the street, you've made an agreement that you will be available. When you said I want to be a yoga teacher, you've made an agreement that you will be available. Mm-hmm. So you have to be available, especially in a small town, all the time.
Yeah. So it's not like, oh, sorry, like I'm in mom mode right now. Like, deal with your back issues tomorrow at noon.
Totally. And I know some teachers that cut the cord, like they teach their 1-hour class and then it's done. I personally don't operate like that. I don't know what's better and I don't know what's right, but that's my advice, is like, be available. Like, this is selfless work. Get out of the way and serve. Like, how could I make her day better? How could I support her? What could I share? Or could I just listen?
Yeah. Yeah. It's super cool too when you have that, you know, that knowledge that a lot of people don't have about the body, and you actually can help them in a capacity that other people can't necessarily help them.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm not a physiotherapist. I really don't know about your SI on the right, but I try to be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another interesting point too, actually, like as a yoga teacher, also having that like side where you're humble and you're honest when you don't know something. Cause I feel like sometimes people really, it seems like they expect you to know everything about the body.
Oh my gosh. I barely know anything.
I mean, the body is so complex.
Right? I know. And I maintain, in my training, the teacher was like, I hesitate to teach anatomy because this isn't even anatomy. But now it's becoming almost physiotherapy. Like that's how much knowledge people have now. Mm-hmm. And I definitely don't. My knowledge base is not that deep in anatomy. Like it's getting better. But it's, when people ask me these questions, I'm like, I feel like you should ask a doctor that.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with like pain issues too.
Yes.
I think that's important. Like for people to remember that, you know, if you don't have the answer, it's okay. Like it doesn't make you a bad yoga teacher because you don't know what's going on in their body, or you don't necessarily know how to help them.
Exactly. And it might be a matter of, okay, I'm going to do a little bit of research and then next week come and ask me and I'll tell you what I found.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Going back to sort of like developing a program to like do a teacher training. I know you said like late nights hammering away, like having moments where it was difficult and you weren't certain. Did you feel like you had all the knowledge? Like it was just in there and you were like, okay, I'm just spitting it out? Or was there a lot of like research and relearning?
There was a lot of research and relearning. I refused to look at any manuals that I already had. I didn't want to look at them because I knew I would copy them. So I did not use my manuals that had been pre-written by other teachers. Mm-hmm. So I looked at the Hatha Yoga Pradikapa. I read Iyengar's books. I read Michael Stone and Stephen Cope. I read tons and tons of books, and I would sometimes skim them like, okay, the cliches. But for me, I really want it to be tangible because I'm not I'm a little bit esoteric, but I want it to be tangible. Like if my dad came to class, would he understand what I was talking about?
Yeah.
So for me, it's really important that I get it. So yeah, I did a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of contemplating.
That's amazing that you did all that work.
And and I'm sure some people could just write. Some people are just like, they got it. But for me, like even you, when I say cliche, like, do you remember?
No, I don't. I was like, did I learn that? I don't remember that word.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So the cliches are, they're like sheaths that prevent you from seeing clearly.
Yeah.
Anyway, Google it after. But I'm not like belittling you. I'm just saying like I wouldn't have known either. Yeah. And so then it was like, okay, I need to know this stuff inside and out if I'm going to teach it.
No, totally. And I have a really good friend from my yoga teacher training, and we have like long yoga talks on the phone, and she's like, oh, do you remember learning about this? And I'm like, what? When was that? She's like, oh, you were probably like focused on your coconut you were eating at that time. And I think though, like, you know, that's something that as a teacher, as a yogi, you could really like beat yourself up about it for not knowing it. But I think it's also one of those things like yoga is so broad. Like, it's like this thing it's frustrating in one way to be like, oh, why do I know so little about this thing that I love? But it's also really humbling to be like, I'm going to continue learning this every day for the rest of my life.
And I think it's beautiful. You know, when we were talking earlier about new teachers and senior teachers, new teachers bring, like a beginner mind to it. New teachers bring the spark back to life. That's why they need to be teaching instead of us like old dogs, because the new teachers are like, you know, they're so passionate about it. And what Patanjali or Patabi Joyce said, 90% practice, 10% theory, or 99% practice, 1% theory. Mm-hmm. So it kind of is an experiential thing. You might not know what the cliches are, but like you probably know them without putting a label on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is super cool. I mean, so with that topic of like yoga so broad, how did you sort of find a place where you're like, okay, I need to like narrow in on this and pick and choose what I want to teach my students?
Yeah. I really love the sutras. I really love making ancient history relevant nowadays. And so that's sort of my spin on it. I love the chakras. I find it really easy way to look at yourself, an easy way to see, am I evolving consciously? Where am I stuck? Why am I not bringing ideas to life? So that's kind of my realm of capacity. And of course I love asana and I love meditation. So yeah, I just sort of leaned into what I believed to be true and what I thought was important for people to know about yoga.
And is there certain requirements, like to develop a yoga teacher training, you have to get registered? Is that correct?
Absolutely. So through Yoga Alliance, that's who I'm through. You need to be registered through Yoga Alliance. You need to have 1,000 or 2,000 teaching hours. So that's something I'd recommend to new teachers, is to start tracking your hours.
Yeah.
I never did, and then had to go back, and it was a little bit intense to contact people from 10 years ago to be like, how many hours did I teach for you? Yeah, you need to have taught for like 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours, have taken your course, and then there's a curriculum that you need to meet all the standards, like 100 hours of practical, 50 hours of X, 20 hours of X. Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. So that's kind of like, it gives you sort of a shell to kind of work within.
Yeah. And once I knew what the shell was, I was like, okay, I have no idea what the heck I'm going to do. Okay. I'll start with the 8 limbs. Okay. Yeah. Start there.
Oh, that's so incredible. I feel like it's really special to create something like in any form, whether or not you're just like writing a blog post or writing a really nice card to somebody, but to create a yoga teacher training is just, it's amazing.
I know, like I don't even think I did it. I look at it and I read it and I'm like, I couldn't have done that. There's no way I could have done that. So I really do feel, it's so cheesy, but it's like, I feel like somebody help me. Somebody help me.
Have you heard of like being in a flow state?
No.
So flow state is like this idea where you're like so enraptured with something that it's literally just pouring out of you. Like you're not really having like conscious thoughts as to what you're doing. So people get into it like playing music or singing or writing or dancing. And I mean, you've probably been there with yoga where you're like so lost in your movements where you don't even realize that like 2 hours has passed.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like that's kind of what happened while you were like creating this teacher training. It's like looking at it and being like, this is unreal. Like I didn't do this.
Totally. And something that was big for me, and I recommend it to all people, it was like no Facebook, no email, no Instagram, like nothing. You do not look, you'll notice how many times you have urges. You're like typing along and you're like, well, I'll just check Facebook. I had to resist that urge. I'm like, no Facebook, no email from, whenever Mika went down to whatever time Mika woke up. And I think that's crucial to get into that flow state, is especially if you're doing something that isn't fun, like writing a manual isn't really fun. Like it is fun, but not like dancing or singing.
Yeah.
So it was very much like cut the distractions and just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. I know I like to go to coffee shops to write because I feel like there's somebody's holding me accountable with their judgment about me not going on Facebook. Like I've got this like, if this person looks over at my computer screen and I've been on Facebook for an hour, they're probably like, what's she doing here?
I know. That's such a good point. I do the same thing.
That's like really good. What's the word? I just completely lost my word. Like structure for yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Like discipline. That's the word I was looking for.
Discipline. Yeah. And like even in the sutras, it's like abhyasa. Abhyasa is discipline. It's discipline in the asana. You don't like big toe pose? I don't care. It's the discipline that's required for your tight hamstrings, to lift your tight leg, to take your tight leg up to the side. Mm-hmm. It's like we have it in the asana, and then it transcends the asana into writing a manual or writing a book or cleaning your toilet.
Yeah.
Be disciplined.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another good lesson from practicing yoga, like in day-to-day life.
Totally.
So I think it's really important for people to have like an understanding that there's so many different options for them. But I think it's also important for people to realize what it takes to do those things. Because I think that sometimes it's like, okay, I'll go do a yoga teacher training. That'll be fun. And then, I'll become a yoga teacher. And then it's like, oh, maybe I'll, open a yoga studio, or maybe I'll develop a teacher training. And I think that, like, from what I'm hearing you say, is that it's something that you really do need to be passionate about, because it is a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there like any advice that you would kind of give people if they're like, they're new teachers and they're like, I think I want to teach people someday?
Yeah. Advice for new teachers: stay the course. Remember what drew you to the path in the first place. Remember that first spark. I mean, that's the hardest thing to ignite, right? Is that first spark. Mm-hmm. And if you can remember why, like, stay the course, practice, read. No matter what avenue you decide to walk, it's like, be disciplined, be focused. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have all the skills if you have the passion. Like, passion, I believe, trumps genetics and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's something that I feel like, a lot of people are kind of like, oh, like somebody's just good at this. Like they were just, Sidney Crosby was just born to play hockey. It's like, well, maybe he's like a little bit naturally better than the average person at hockey, but he also loves hockey and he's practiced hockey his entire life every single day.
Absolutely.
And I think it's the same thing with practicing yoga and teaching yoga. And it seems like, to teach yogis to be yoga teachers, you have to have that passion and that fire as well.
Oh, yeah. And I think you have to care so deeply about people.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who teaches yoga cares deeply about people, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so as well. And so doing yoga teacher trainings, I mean, that's a pretty big time commitment. Is that something that obviously you're very passionate about it? And I feel like I'm hearing you say that it's really worth it for you.
Yeah.
But is it something that you would really caution other people to make sure that it's something that they really want to do?
I don't think you would do it unless you really wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I have a really great team of teachers that come and facilitate for me. So it's a lot of time, but I also believe in community, because I'm good at one thing while Mindy and Misty and Jeff are good at other things that I can call on them to teach a subject that I think they could share more passionately than I could. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Plus, I think it's important for students to experience different teachers and hear another voice and another perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great point. This idea that, other people have great things to offer as well.
Totally. And it's not the Erin show. Like, I really don't ever want it to be that way, because I don't learn from one person. I have many people that teach me.
Yeah. I think that's something that I really love about you, is how humble you are.
Oh, thank you.
Like, you're an incredible yogi and an incredible teacher. So I love like the humbleness that you bring to yoga and your yoga practice. And it's really inspiring to listen to.
Oh, thank you. I think it's the key is a humble heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something that, I really learned, like the beginner's mind and kind of like, taking a step back. That was a big learning for me in my yoga teacher training.
Totally.
And I think so many people can, benefit from a training like that, even if maybe yoga is not their passion, because you learn so much that's applicable just to life.
Absolutely. And you, and like how you tick and all those good things.
Yeah. Yeah. When you get like frustrated in a pose or in a meditation, I feel like it's, it's one of those things that you do in other places in your life. Like, you don't just do it on the mat. You do it in so many other realms and spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a place for study, self-study.
Yeah. It's an amazing growth opportunity. Is there any other advice that you have learned sort of along your journey that you'd want to share with listeners out there?
I think it's so important to share your own message. I think people can get caught up in mimicking their teacher or wanting to teach like their teacher, but the medicine that I have to share is very different than the medicine you have to share. And to remember why you do what you do and be you, really be you. Because if you're wearing the mask of me or Jeff or whomever, you can't come through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing advice, because I feel like, I think it does take time as a new teacher to kind of find your voice and kind of, fumble your way past like instructing students into new poses. Like nothing worse than getting into a sequence and then you're like, oh, I've actually never taught this before. And it's like really awkward wording.
How do I get them out of this fast?
Yeah.
I know.
It's all like part of the journey though. When you were a new teacher, did you prepare your sequences beforehand, or have you always just kind of stepped onto the mat and just taught?
I actually still do prepare classes, and a teacher of mine says you prepare the class so the goddess knows you're ready to channel. So I have a bare bones structure, or maybe even a very exact structure of how I intend to teach a class. And then I might be moved to do something entirely different. But for me, it's almost like a creative process as well. And I don't want to be on autopilot, and I don't ever want to be bored with my own voice. So I do like to prepare.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's amazing. And after teaching for like 13 years, how do you sort of like switch it up and keep it interesting for you without, I guess, like throwing things out there that students maybe, are like, what is this? This is kind of, different, which there's nothing wrong with different, but, a lot of students come to class to kind of go through your standard vinyasa flow class.
Exactly. How do I keep it fresh? My practice, I think getting on the mat and knowing that it doesn't have to be fancy. I know in this Instagram generation, people think it has to be fancy, but what feels really good for people, I think, is like a meditative state. And so I constantly remind myself, you're not teaching Cirque du Soleil. You're teaching meditation. You're teaching focus and concentration. And so, that's kind of my mantra, but I think I'm ever evolving and ever changing depending on my own practice. And so that keeps it fresh for me, is making sure that I'm on the mat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's something that I've sort of wondered about since I'm still like figuring out teaching, is like, at some point, is it going to get like really boring to do this like warrior 1, warrior 2, reverse warrior, extended side angle?
I know. And I'm still not bored with it. So no, I don't think it gets boring.
I guess it's just like finding these new things in your body that you can cue, and finding new things with your students, and your classes are always different. So it's.
And, something that's really powerful is once you get steady Eddie on the sequencing and the cues, philosophy, like start to teach a little bit of philosophy so that one person once said, what if Iyengar, bless his heart, if he was still here, imagine if Iyengar and his alcoholic brother-in-law came to your class. Could you give something to Iyengar and the alcoholic brother-in-law? Like, you've got all walks of life. So how do you hit a new student and a very experienced student? Maybe the alcoholic reference wasn't a great one. So, on the record, but you know what I'm saying? Like anybody that comes, could you teach to everyone, give them something to walk away with?
Yeah, totally. I love that reference, because people are so different. And I mean, people come to classes, and especially in a small town, when you teach regularly, you probably have a lot of familiar faces, but sometimes they're strangers and you really have no idea kind of what their story is, or what their day's like, or what they're going through.
Absolutely.
And it's like, how do you hit this home to every single person in the room?
Totally.
Yeah. I think that's really cool advice, because it's something that I've been thinking about, is like, at some point, what do I do with these postures that it's not stale? Because I feel like students can hear it. Like when you're like, and lift your arms up and pivot your back foot down and sink your hips down and square your hips off. Like it just gets, it's like
redundant. Yes.
Like robot yoga. Nobody wants robot yoga.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause I think there's layers to teaching. The first layer is get good with the sequence, learn to teach the sequence clearly, and then be great at interacting with your students, understand their bodies, start adjusting, start learning how to touch bodies. then start to study philosophy and pepper it in, you know, and like there's always a layer that you can add to your skill set as a teacher.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. Do you find that that's really like, it is like peeling an onion? Like, you know, new teachers should really be patient with that process and just sort of.
For sure. For sure. Like it's like standing bare naked in front of an entire room when you get up there. Like I still have those moments where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm embarrassed. But yeah, like you're honing your craft. Take time. It takes time to become an artist.
Mm-hmm. I feel like in sort of this generation where everything's, you know, like if the internet doesn't load within 3 seconds, you know, we're frustrated. If, you know, our Instagram isn't updated every 5 minutes, we're like, what are people doing? Why aren't they posting?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there. Like, what are these people doing? I need some entertainment.
Totally.
But it's like, you know, how do we get these people who are coming out as new yoga teachers to just, and I mean, it's practicing what you preach as well. Again, like being in the moment and just kind of embracing that learning curve.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like sometimes it's, you know, you see people who are really incredible and you're like, I just want to be them. Like, you know, how do I just be Sean Korn right now?
Yeah, totally.
But you can't just step out of a teacher training and, you know, be Sean Korn.
Yeah. But I think if there's like, you know, that reference of like an acorn doesn't know that it's going to grow into an oak tree. Mm-hmm. I think if there's that little spark of an acorn within you, like a little bit of passion for becoming a Sean Korn, an oak tree, it'll happen. It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's super cool. I think that's amazing. It's patient journey that we're kind of all on.
Oh, yep.
And yeah, technology just speeds us up, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's nice to like slow it down and bring it back to the basics. So a question that I'm asking everyone that I'm interviewing is if you could go back to Erin 13 years ago as like a brand new teacher, what's like one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
It's all coming. It's all unfolding. Enjoy the journey.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Good question.
Yeah. I was just trying to think of something that, you know, I feel like that's the cool thing about talking to people with a lot of experiences and thinking about, you know, where you were 13 years ago and what you know now and what, you know, had you known that 13 years ago. How it would have been different.
Yes.
And not that I think that we should really live with no regrets and learn from our experiences, but it's cool to be able to pass on the things that you know now to other people who are, you know, a little ways behind you on that journey.
We stand on the shoulders of giants. Like I want to stand on my teacher's shoulders and I want people standing on mine. Like I want you to learn through my terrible mistakes so that you don't have to make them and you'll make other terrible mistakes, but you got to teach that to then the next, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. That's such a good thought process.
Yeah. It's a cool idea too. Like you can kind of take that concept to being a parent as well, I'm sure, where it's like, you know, my parents did this. I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something that might go one day is like, okay, you know, these are all the great things like my mom and dad did, but here's something I can do different.
Exactly. Oh, I'd be so curious. I'll have to ask him that question. Mika, if you could go back 13 years ago, what would you tell yourself about your parents? Hey, man.
He's a cutie.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom?
No, go after it. Make things happen. And yeah, I think the fastest way inward is to serve. So think about your work as serving. Serve your community, your family, your friends.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Totally. So good to see you.
Yes, you as well. So there's Erin Evans for you. Hopefully you've learned a lot from her path as a yoga teacher, moving into becoming a yoga teacher and designing her own teacher trainings. And if that's something that interests you, definitely check out the show notes at www.mbomyoga.com. Check out Erin's website. It's erinevansyoga.com. There'll be a link for that on the show notes as well. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, or you want to say hi at all, please feel free to shoot me an email. It's info@mbomyoga.com. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, thank you so much for listening.